Hello and welcome to another episode of The Things I Want But Can't Own Yet. Now, in the previous episode, we talked about 4 different items that I really wanted but just couldn't own at this moment in time. So, in this episode, I'm going to talk about consoles. Now, to keep this video a bit shorter, I'm only going to talk about 3 consoles today. 3 consoles that I really want in the future, essentially. So anyway guys, let's talk about the 3 consoles that I really want in the future. So the first console I really want is actually one that's been released recently, the Nintendo Switch. Yes, that amazing portable home console hybrid console. Now, it's not as powerful as the PS4 or Xbox One, but who cares, because it's portable. The reason why I really want it is because obviously there's a lot of great exclusive games, like the Legend of Zelda game and Mario Kart and all other stuff, so fantastic Nintendo titles, and of course the upcoming Super Mario Odyssey recording this video. But I also want it for the fact that a lot of AAA games and indie games which have been ported to or been on PS3, PS4, PC and any other console you can think of this generation, the ones that do come to the Switch are still pretty good graphically, and more importantly, when you take it into portable mode, which I think, which I will use it for mostly, still playing the game at 720p, which is still great. The display on the console is superb. The Joy-Cons, as far as I'm aware, feel good. I've actually tried the Switch before once, and I did appreciate and like the Joy-Cons. I never took them out though, so haven't got any experience on that part. But the point is, the games are fun to play, portable, and most importantly, that screen, as I said before, is lovely to look at, even at 720p. But the screen's so small that it doesn't really matter. And the battery life is quite decent. Yes, I know, between 2.5 to 3 hours in portable mode isn't exactly fantastic. It's about on par with the 3DS. However, despite that, considering that the games are mostly AAA to indie games, to me that's quite impressive. And I think 3 hours these days is more than enough, because I don't spend that much time on portable gaming anymore, but when I do, I usually spend about a few hours at a time, and if I do decide to go a bit more the length, I've always got a charger with me, so it's not a big deal in 2017. I think the weirdest part that I like about it, besides the games and the design and the display and the controllers and the fact you can change so much about the Switch, and the fact that, if you get the red and blue Joy-Cons, it looks great. I think the main selling factor for me is the SD card bit. The system only comes with 32GB, which is very shockingly bad in times like this, when games are coming on 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, even 100 gigs at times. So 32 gigs is nothing, and Nintendo even recently confirmed this. But I'd happily buy a new external SD card for it, maybe 128GB, I guess, maybe even more. I know the system can support up to 2TB, which is insane. I would happily buy a new external SD card for it, and I like how with cartridges, you got shorter load times, less buffers, and I don't know, there's just something about going back to cartridge which feels nostalgic for obviously older fans of Nintendo, N64, NES, Super Nintendo, but for me, it's a new experience, and I'm kind of eager because I'm so used to disc-based systems like PlayStation, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, and of course moving to PC, I'm now used to digital selling, so Steam and whatnot. So there's this kind of charm about the Nintendo Switch, which I think Nintendo have got down well. And as for me getting this console, I would say next year. I was hoping to get it this very year. Unfortunately, due to a lot of complications, that's not going to happen anymore. So hopefully by next year, late next year, I should have one in my possession, and if I do, I'll have a lot of games to pick from that point, so the Nintendo Switch will never die. So what about my next console? So the next console that I really want is either the PC Engine, also known as the TurboGrafx 16 in the US. So both the PC Engine and the TurboGrafx 16 were both released to combat the NES, which obviously dominated in the 80s. The TurboGrafx 16 had a 16-bit GPU and an 8-bit processor, so it kind of shared some resemblance with the NES there, but just had a more powerful GPU, so it could do 16-bit 32-bit graphics, as my friends would used to say. The TurboGrafx 16 was then thrusted into the 16-bit war with the Sega Mega Drive or Genesis in the US, and of course the Super Famicom, or as we like to know in the UK and US, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. The name rolls off your tongue. So obviously at this point, the TurboGrafx 16 was shoved onto Sega and onto Nintendo, and it lost in the US very badly. I think about 2 million of these consoles were sold in the US, so only 142 games ever got released in the US. So if you're from the US and you have a TurboGrafx 16, your console is really rare, and the games are even rarer. However, if you bought the PC Engine in Japan, you would have had lots and lots of games. I think you would have had 726 games, and you also would have had over just under 6 million units of these consoles sold, which means they're more likely to be purchased by people like myself than the TurboGrafx 16, but most of the games are in Japanese, so that's a bit of a problem there. But for me personally, the greatest strength of the PC Engine is the abundance of shooters. Yes, there's so many shooters on there that I don't think it matters if I knew what the language was. I'm sure I could figure it all out eventually, but for the RPG games, which required a lot of dialogue heavy scenes to move them forward, that would be a problem. So when can I get it? Well, this is the problem, you see, because the TurboGrafx 16 PC Engine console costs quite a bit, but what is the killer here is not the console, it's the games. A lot of the good games are rare, and they cost anywhere between 60 to hundreds of pounds. It's ridiculous, and it means making a collection is time consuming and expensive. It means if I get the console, the chance of me getting a huge library of games is a very slim margin at that. I'd be honest and say that the likelihood of me owning this console is probably going to be 2019 onwards. I actually had a quick look at Gate of Thunder, and it's hard to find a TurboGrafx 16 version. The PC Engine version is a bit in demand, and there's a lot more of that version, but even so, it was still expensive. So that's a console for the future. And my last console today, I'm going to talk about the Sega Dreamcast. Yes, Sega's final console before they left the console business altogether and focused on making software. So everyone knows the Sega Dreamcast by now. It's a legendary console for all the right reasons. It was one of the first consoles to have proper online play. It had 64-bit graphics, which were amazing in the late 1990s. It had a lot of great titles in its earlier days, so 99 to 2000, and it was an arcade killer, quite literally. It was like arcade in the house proper for once. In fact, even better than that, perhaps, at the time. And of course, you could go on the internet, which for a console back then was unprecedented. That just blows my mind, even today. So is Sega. Obviously, they had a lot of mismanagement issues, starting with the Sega CD, then the Sega 32, and then, of course, the Sega Saturn. All of these three consoles were literally obliterated. They were all failed. Well, the Sega CD was disappointing. The 32X sucked and failed, and the Saturn, being a great console, just didn't do well in Europe or the US, although it had good success in Japan though. But my point is that mismanagement in Sega caused them to lose consumer confidence, and most importantly, it caused them to lose stocks and all sorts of things. And when Sega did release a console, people just thought, oh, let's see what they're going to release next. They never really took the company seriously, so the Sega Dreamcast was Sega's way of saying, look, we made mistakes, here's the console that you've all been wanting from us, let the competition begin. And it was the first 6th gen console released at the time. Sega tried to please people, and they did, especially in the US, where they sold 500,000 units within the first few days, and it looked like Sega was back. Unfortunately, Sony said nope, and with other consoles coming up like Microsoft's Xbox, and of course Nintendo's GameCube, and of course with the PlayStation still selling out and stuff along that nature, and of course a huge recession in Japan in the year 2000, and Sega not willing to adopt the DVD format, which would become popular in the 2000s, Sega was doomed to fail. And luckily, in the end, they were able to reinvent themselves and make software, so at least Sega are still about today. When will I be likely to be getting this console? I'd say 2020 onwards, because I want the TurboGrafx CD and 16 or PC Engine CD, I want the Nintendo Switch, and then I want this and other consoles that I haven't mentioned in this episode. So it's going to be cramming it all into one go, and it will be tough, but I would say 2020 onwards I will be looking at the Sega Dreamcast once more, and hopefully the prices won't fluctuate too much by the time I get to that stage. But guys, that was my Things that I want but I can't own yet, episode 2, all about the 3 consoles that I really want but can't get at the moment. So what do you guys think, and what kind of things do you guys really want in the future that you simply can't own yet? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, please give it a like, and of course, if you love content like this and more, do consider subscribing to this channel. But until then folks, this has been Things That I Want But Can't Own Yet. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.